Usually when you think about the future of healthcare, there's this expectation of just cold, sleek precision.
Right, like out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, exactly. You imagine entering this pristine, perfectly lit room where you just lie down in a glowing scanner,
Oh, for sure.
and then a superhuman algorithm analyzes every single cell in your body, and a robotic voice just dictates a flawless cure,
It's very binary, very clean.
right? It completely removed the messy, unpredictable human element from the whole equation.
It's a comforting vision, but it's entirely disconnected from the physical reality of how human bodies actually work, like
Yeah.
how we age, how we break, how we recover. We like the idea of removing friction, but health is, by definition, just inherently full of friction.
Definitely. And when you step into the actual reality of modern patient care,
Hmm.
specifically stuff like neurodevelopment, aging, trauma, and rehabilitation,
Hmm.
that sleek spaceship imagery just shatters instantly.
Oh, completely shatters.
Because the healthcare landscape you and I rely on every day is just a massive paradox right now.
It really is.
On one hand, the data proves that highly personalized, empathetic, human-centric care delivered inside a patient's own home is more crucial than it has ever been.
Yes.
But on the other hand, the medical industry is just rushing headlong into this era of automated, AI-driven decisions.
Which is wild.
It is. We are literally trying to balance the irreplaceable warmth of human empathy with, the seductive processing power of algorithms.
And that tension is basically reshaping every single interaction you have with a doctor or a caregiver today.
Yeah, you see it everywhere.
If you look at the intersection of traditional medical expertise, the rapid professionalization of the people who actually care for the vulnerable at home, and then the explosive integration of artificial intelligence into that pipeline.
That's a lot to take in.
It is. You see a system on the brink of either a massive breakthrough or just a catastrophic failure of competence.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because to understand how those forces are colliding,
Yeah.
you can't just look at the technology in a vacuum.
No, absolutely not.
You have to understand the human experience that actually necessitates it. And for this deep dive, I've been looking at the career evolution of a prominent French physician, Dr. Christophe Delong.
Oh, his trajectory is fascinating.
It really is. It's basically a perfect mirror for the evolution of modern patient care over the last 40 years.
Because he didn't just stay in one narrow, highly theoretical lane, right?
Yeah, exactly. He spent his clinical years treating the absolute extremes of human movement.
And those extremes are where you actually see the mechanics of the human body tested to their absolute limits.
Yeah, that's where the real work happens,
So in 1991, he secures a position as an interne des hôpitaux de Paris.
which is a huge deal.
It is. For context, the internet in Paris is this incredibly grueling, highly competitive gauntlet.
Like, incredibly stressful.
Oh, yeah. It essentially selects for people who can process massive amounts of clinical data under extreme pressure.
Right.
So he takes that rigor and goes to the Hôpital National de Saint-Maurice, where he dives into pediatric sports injuries and orthopedics.
And, think about the biomechanics of a growing child versus just a static adult.
It's completely different.
It is. When you're treating pediatric trauma, the playing field is constantly shifting. A child's bones are elongating,
Yeah, their growth plates are wide open.
Exactly. Their center of gravity is moving almost monthly, and their neuromuscular control is constantly having to recalibrate just to accommodate their new size.
It's basically a moving target.
Right. You aren't just fixing a broken part. You are trying to repair a machine while it is actively rebuilding itself.
That's a great way to put it. You're trying to predict the future geometry of the skeleton.
Wow. Yeah.
Because a misaligned fracture in a 7-year-old doesn't just mean a limp today.
Right. It has long-term effects.
It means severe compensatory joint degradation by the time they are 30.
Which is terrifying, honestly.
It is. So Delong builds this deep expertise in the rapid growth and resilience of youth. But then he pivots to the exact opposite end of the spectrum.
Which is such a wild career move.
Totally. For nearly 2 decades, from 2005 to 2022, he serves as the chef de service, the head of the Department for Geriatric Rehabilitation at the Groupe Hospitalier Saint-Perrine in Paris.
Going from growing children to aging seniors is just a massive leap in clinical philosophy.
It's night and day.
At Saint-Perrine, he created a transversal service managing 50 paramedical professionals, and the physiological reality of geriatrics is just brutal.
It really is.
You're dealing with sarcopenia, which is, the natural loss of muscle mass.
Right, and osteoporosis.
Yeah, and the degradation of the vestibular system, which controls balance, plus neurocognitive decline. The biomechanics aren't expanding anymore. They're literally collapsing.
And what happens when a clinician spends decades watching that entire arc, from the elasticity of a child to the fragility of an octogenarian, is they begin to see the systemic flaws in how we practice medicine.
Like the big picture flaws.
Exactly. Hospitals are fundamentally reactive environments. They are engineered to deal with acute crises.
Like, you don't go there when things are fine.
No, you go there when a bone is protruding from the skin, or when the pain is completely unmanageable, or when mobility has already been completely lost.
Yeah, you don't go to the ICU to learn how to walk slightly better.
Yeah.
So you can avoid a hip-shattering fall 5 years from now.
Exactly. The hospital isn't built for optimization, it's built for salvage.
For salvage. Wow.
Ooh.
That was a heavy way to put it, but it's true.
And that realization is really the driving force behind his eventual pivot.
Right.
After 40 years in the clinical trenches, he steps back from traditional reactive practice. He shifts his entire focus to become a consulting expert in sports health and an autonomy coordinator in the West Paris area.
Which is a huge shift.
Yeah, he adopts an approach he terms Wellness 3.0.
Which heavily involves telecoaching and integrating the ICO program for seniors.
Right. Exactly.
And ICO, for anyone listening who doesn't know, is a World Health Organization initiative. It stands for Integrated Care for Older People.
It's a really important program.
It is. It's an aggressive shift away from the traditional model of merely treating distinct diseases, like, just throwing a pill at hypertension and another pill at arthritis.
Right, the whack-a-mole approach.
Exactly. Instead, ICOPE focuses entirely on monitoring and maintaining intrinsic capacity. It tracks locomotor capacity, vitality, cognition, psychology, vision, hearing, all of it.
It's incredibly comprehensive.
The goal is to detect the absolute earliest signs of decline before they cross the threshold into actual clinical pathology.
The underlying philosophy is preventative autonomy, and
Yeah.
he spent a massive portion of his career trying to democratize this highly specialized knowledge, pushing it out of the hospital walls and into the public consciousness.
Yeah.
He published extensively to tear down the medical myths that actively harm people's autonomy.
I mean, his book, Le Mal de Dos, The Back Age, is a perfect example of that.
Absolutely.
For generations, the standard medical advice for severe back pain was just bed rest. Just lie down, don't move, let it heal.
Which is terrible advice.
It is. And DeLong systematically refuted that because physiologically, prolonged rest is one of the worst things you can do for a mechanical back injury.
Yeah, it completely backfires.
When you stop moving, the stabilizing muscles like your multifidus, your erector spinae, they begin to atrophy incredibly quickly.
Right.
The ligaments tighten up, blood flow decreases, and the inflammatory markers just pull in the tissue.
Because movement is what actually lubricates the intervertebral discs.
Exactly.
It's what drives nutrients into the vascular tissues. By telling people to lie down, the medical establishment was inadvertently engineering chronic pain.
That is just wild to think about.
It is. DeLong's work in publishing, his writing on women in sports, and his analysis of athletic nutrition were all designed to give the patient the operating manual for their own body.
It kind of makes you think of a mechanic, right? Like a mechanic who spends 30 years in a noisy, greasy garage.
Okay, I like this analogy.
Day in and day out, he's pulling apart engines that have completely seized up, rebuilding shattered transmissions, just dealing with catastrophic vehicular failure.
Right, the salvage work.
Exactly. But eventually, that master mechanic looks at the endless line of broken cars and realizes that the sustainable solution isn't fixing the carnage in the shop.
Yeah.
The real solution is going out into the world, teaching people how to drive properly, and helping them change their oil in their own driveways so the engines never seize up in the first place.
But the logistical nightmare of that realization is scale.
Oh, for sure.
Dr. DeLong has a deeply intuitive encyclopedic knowledge of human biomechanics, but he's just one biological entity.
He can't clone himself.
Right. He cannot be in 1,000 driveways at once. He can't sit in every living room across France ensuring that an elderly woman's gait hasn't subtly shifted to favor a weakening left hip,
Yeah.
Or ensuring that a child's sensory processing is developing normally.
Because true at-home autonomy, the kind of preventative, deeply personalized care that actually keeps people out of the reactive, expensive hospital system, It requires a massive physical presence.
You need an army.
You really do.
You need a highly skilled, widely distributed support system. And that brings us to the foundational infrastructure of at-home care, which is a sector of the economy that operates almost invisibly to those outside of it.
But it is absolutely the bedrock of modern society.
It really is.
If you look at the data surrounding organizations like AMA Campus, IPERIA, and OPCO-EP, the sheer scale of the human effort is just staggering.
And numbers are huge.
We're talking about 3.4 million private employers in France alone.
Yeah.
Like, let that number sink in.
It's hard to even picture.
That isn't 3.4 million businesses.
Yeah.
That is 3.4 million families or individual citizens who officially employ someone to provide care in their private home.
Right.
To service that demand, there is a workforce of 1.2 million employees. These are the childminders, the ASMATs, the life assistants for the elderly, and the family employees.
It is a massive, decentralized workforce. But historically, society has made a very dangerous assumption about this kind of labor.
What do you mean?
Well, we've treated it as an extension of domestic duty, assuming that caring for a vulnerable toddler or a deteriorating octogenarian merely requires a good heart, a kind demeanor, and common sense.
Ah, yeah, I see what you mean.
Like anyone can just do it if they're nice enough.
But kindness doesn't prevent a pressure ulcer from forming on a bedbound patient.
Exactly.
A good heart doesn't stop a toddler from choking, and it certainly doesn't help you navigate the intense psychological turbulence of an elderly patient suffering from acute dementia.
No, it doesn't.
Caring for the vulnerable requires rigorous, technical, and highly specific methodologies.
And that is the exact gap these training organizations are filling. They are utilizing modern, large-scale e-learning platforms to professionalize a fragmented workforce. AMA Campus, for instance, isn't just offering generic babysitting 101. They are preparing individuals for the key IEPE, which is the rigorous foundational French state diploma for early childhood professionals.
And the granularity of the curriculum is what really caught my attention.
Oh, it's incredibly detailed.
They have 14-hour modules dedicated entirely to understanding and managing a child's emotions.
Which is so needed.
Because physiologically, a toddler's prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for logic, impulse control, and emotional regulation, is completely underdeveloped.
Yeah, it's basically offline.
When they have a meltdown, it's not them being stubborn. It's a genuine neurological overwhelm where the amygdala has essentially hijacked the brain.
Right.
Training a caregiver to recognize that neurobiological reality and giving them the specific de-escalation techniques to co-regulate that child's nervous system, I mean, that changes the entire developmental trajectory of that child.
It really does. They are also taking highly specialized therapeutic frameworks and democratizing them. Well, they offer training on the Montessori method, which is often associated with, like, elite private preschools, but fundamentally is about fostering independence and intrinsic motivation by structuring the physical environment.
Right.
And perhaps most fascinatingly, they are training at-home workers in the Snoezelen concept.
Snoezelen sounds whimsical, honestly, like a children's book character.
It does sound funny.
But the mechanics behind it are profound.
Very much so. It was developed in the Netherlands in the 1970s, and it's a therapy designed around a controlled multisensory environment.
Okay.
Think about a patient with advanced Alzheimer's or severe autism. Their brain is often either chronically understimulated or violently overstimulated by normal environmental input.
Oh, I see.
The standard hospital environment, harsh fluorescent lights, beeping monitors, sterile smells, that triggers a constant fight-or-flight sympathetic nervous system response.
So it's pure sensory trauma.
Exactly. Snoezelen counters this by creating a space where every sensory input is controllable and intentional.
That makes a lot of sense.
It uses specialized lighting, tactile surfaces, specific olfactory inputs, and soundscapes to bypass the cognitive pathways that are damaged and communicate directly with the sensory processing centers of the brain.
Wow.
It can actively downregulate an agitated patient into a calm parasympathetic state without the use of heavy chemical sedatives.
That is incredible. And the fact that organizations like IPERIA are funding modules so an at-home caregiver can apply these principles in a residential living room, that is a massive leap forward in preventative care.
It is, but professionalizing 1.2 million people is an economic beast.
Oh, definitely. Who pays for all that?
The funding mechanics required to make this continuous learning possible are incredibly intricate. You have OPCO EP, which is a massive skilled operator in France supporting 54 different professional branches and hundreds of thousands of small businesses.
Okay.
You have the National Employment Agency, France Travail. You have the CPF, which is a personal training account that accrues monetary value over a French worker's career, specifically earmarked for this kind of upskilling.
Right.
And you have Iperia, which specifically manages professionalization for private employers, offering these workers up to 58 hours of fully funded training a year.
It's an ecosystem built on the premise that the human touch requires constant calibration.
Yes.
But I get the human element. I really do. But I have to push back here for a second.
Okay, go ahead.
Because we are looking at this massive investment in human training right at the exact moment the technology sector is promising to automate all of this.
Right, the AI boom.
Yeah. If you read the venture capital pitches, the future is robotic sensors, ambient biometric monitoring, and AI agents that can detect a fall before it happens.
True.
So why are we pouring hundreds of millions of euros into teaching a human being how to soothe a dementia patient or manage a toddler when the prevailing tech narrative says algorithms will eventually handle all the monitoring and the heavy lifting?
Because the tech narrative fundamentally misunderstands the mechanism of healing and the psychology of vulnerability.
How so?
Technology, no matter how advanced, lacks physical intuition. A sensor embedded in the floorboards can certainly track an elderly person's gait velocity and alert a central server if they are shuffling, indicating a fall risk.
Right.
An AI can monitor an elevated heart rate, but an algorithm cannot walk into the room, read the subtle, nonverbal fear in that senior's eyes, hold their arm, and build the psychological trust required to convince them to get up and take a shower that day.
So the algorithm detects the metric, but it can't cross the emotional threshold to enact the actual intervention.
Exactly. An AI cannot read the micro-expressions of a nonverbal autistic child that indicate an impending sensory overload and preemptively offer a comforting physical touch.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The goal of technology in the healthcare space is not and should not be to replace the human caregiver. The goal is scaffolding.
Scaffolding, I like that.
If a caregiver spends 40% of their shift manually taking blood pressure, filling out generic assessment forms, and trying to remember the specifics of a complex physical therapy protocol, they are not looking the patient in the eye.
So you use the cutting-edge tech to absorb the analytical and administrative burden, thereby protecting and amplifying the time the human spends actually being human.
Precisely. And that brings us to the technological bridge.
Right.
How do you take the deep, highly specialized clinical intuition of someone like Dr. Delong, who can diagnose a biomechanical flaw just by watching someone walk down a hallway, and scale that capability so that an at-home caregiver or a patient can access it instantly?
You encode the intuition into computer vision.
Yes.
Let's look at Conexa, the health tech startup Dr. Delong founded in September 2024, building on tech foundations and product launches from 2023.
Right. Connex is a prime example of this.
They are utilizing artificial intelligence to fundamentally revolutionize movement analysis and diagnosis.
And if you look at their timeline, it is an incredibly aggressive trajectory. They established their core strategic partnerships in 2022. They launched the flagship tool in 2023.
Wow, that's fast.
By 2024, they are expanding globally, winning innovation awards, and they are projecting an absolute explosion to 10,000 active users by 2025.
That's huge.
In the medical tech space, where regulatory hurdles and adoption friction usually slow things to an absolute crawl, that kind of velocity indicates they have solved a critical pain point.
And the pain point is access to expert biomechanical analysis, right?
Exactly.
Think about the traditional process. If you have chronic knee pain, you book an appointment, you wait 3 months, you go into a clinic, a specialist watches you walk, maybe they put physical markers on your joints to track the angles, and then they give you a protocol.
Right.
It's slow, it's expensive, and it happens maybe once every few months.
If you're lucky.
Yeah. Conexa is taking complex neural networks, deep learning models trained on millions of data points of human movement, and putting that analytical power behind the lens of a standard smartphone camera.
It's the ultimate democratization of his life's work. The AI handles pose estimation. It identifies the key skeletal landmarks, the ankles, the knees, the hips, the shoulders, in three-dimensional space, frame by frame.
That's incredible.
It calculates the joint angles, the kinematic chain, the velocity of the movement, and the subtle asymmetries that a human eye might miss.
Oh, wow.
It takes the esoteric knowledge of how an elderly person's gait degrades or how a post-surgical knee should track during a squat and turns it into real-time, actionable feedback for the user in their own home.
You know, the irony is fantastic here.
What do you mean?
You have the most abstract, complex mathematical constructs we've ever created. Neural networks with billions of parameters operating in high-dimensional space, being deployed to analyze the oldest, most visceral, most fundamental human trait imaginable. The way we walk across a room.
It is a profound synthesis, but, and this is a big but, the moment you introduce artificial intelligence into the diagnostic and assessment loop, you open a Pandora's box of systemic risk.
Because you're shifting the responsibility.
Right. We are transitioning authority from a human doctor who has a medical license and personal liability to an algorithm.
Which introduces a terrifying question. What happens when the machine gets it wrong, but the output looks so mathematically flawless and confident that the human operator doesn't even think to question it?
And that leads us to the most critical aspect of this entire landscape. There is deep, extensive research detailing what is known as AI competence asymmetries.
AI competence asymmetry.
Yes, and it completely dismantles the blind faith we tend to place in these systems.
The research argues that generative AI and complex analytical models don't just occasionally glitch or make simple mathematical errors.
No, it's much deeper than that.
Right. They create systemic, deeply embedded risks by actively inverting traditional hierarchies and masking their own fragilities.
Exactly.
They create an incredibly convincing illusion of expertise where genuine ignorance actually prevails.
The researchers dissect this danger by breaking it down into 4 distinct dimensions of asymmetry. The first is technical asymmetry.
Okay, explain that one.
This is the fundamental gap between the developers who engineer the AI and the professionals who use it. The developers understand the weights, the parameters, the biases in the training data, and the inherent limitations of mathematical models.
But the end user doesn't.
Right. The rush doctor, the clinic manager, the caregiver, they experience the AI purely as a black box. You feed it an input, it spits out an output.
Yeah.
Because the user has no visibility into the hidden layers of the neural network computing the answer, they are entirely vulnerable to misinterpreting the result.
They just trust it blindly.
They accept the output at face value because they literally lack the vocabulary to interrogate the mechanics of the machine.
Which seamlessly triggers the second dimension, decision-making asymmetry.
Yes.
And this is particularly destructive in a healthcare setting. Historically, authority was a byproduct of expertise. You became the chief of surgery because you were the most experienced expert surgeon.
Right.
Your deep understanding of human anatomy gave you the authority to dictate protocols.
But AI inverts that relationship.
How so?
You now have administrators, executives, and even senior physicians mandating the use of diagnostic algorithms, predictive models, and triage software that they do not scientifically or mathematically comprehend. You have authority proceeding without expertise. They hold the power to implement the tool, but they lack the technical literacy to audit it.
It's the equivalent of a hospital CEO forcing surgeons to use a new scalpel made of an unknown alien metal, simply because the marketing brochure said it was efficient.
That is exactly what it's like. And the pressure to adopt these tools brings us to the third dimension, which is temporal asymmetry.
Temporal as in time.
Right. This is the brutal tension between the instantaneous velocity of AI generation and the painstakingly slow, methodical human time required to actually verify the information.
Okay, picture a chaotic geriatric ward or a busy general practice. A physician is just drowning in patient files. They use an AI tool to summarize a complex 20-year medical history and propose a differential diagnosis. The AI generates a comprehensive, perfectly formatted 5-page report in exactly 3.4 seconds.
Boom. Done.
But for that human doctor to rigorously verify every single claim in that report, cross-reference the proposed drug interactions, check the cited studies, and analyze the underlying logic, that requires 3 hours of deep, focused cognitive labor.
And the fundamental reality of modern healthcare is that no one has 3 hours.
Right. The doctor has 10 minutes before the next patient walks in.
Exactly. The system physically cannot accommodate the time required for verification. So the extreme pressure for rapid throughput forces the professional to simply rely on the AI's output.
Wow.
The structural dynamics of the clinic begin to privilege velocity over validity. Speed becomes the primary metric of success, even when human reflection is clinically critical.
And the reason we are so willing to accept that speed without verification is because of the fourth dimension.
This is the core trap.
Yeah, epistemological asymmetry. This is the massive disconnect between appearance and substance.
To understand why this happens, you have to look at how these large language models actually function. When an AI generates text, it isn't thinking or reasoning in the human sense.
Right.
It is performing highly sophisticated statistical next token prediction. It is calculating the probability of which word should sequentially follow the previous word based on the vast ocean of text it ingested during training.
So it's not retrieving a fact from a vault of truth. It's mathematically guessing what a factual sentence looks like.
Precisely. And because it is trained to emulate human fluency, the output it generates looks incredibly rigorous.
Oh, it was beautiful.
It uses the exact right clinical terminology. It structures the argument with logical bullet points. It inserts citations with little numbers and brackets. It adopts a tone of absolute, unshakable confidence.
But beneath that surface fluency, the reasoning might be completely fallacious. The AI might connect to entirely unrelated biological symptoms. The citations might point to studies that just do not exist, or it might fundamentally misinterpret the conclusion of a real study. The terminology is structurally perfect, but semantically hollow.
Superficial fluency actively masks fundamental structural weakness.
Think about a beautifully constructed, multi-tiered wedding cake.
Okay.
You look at it from across the room, and it is a masterpiece of structural engineering. The fondant is perfectly smooth. The sugar flowers are mathematically precise. The proportions are flawless.
It looks delicious.
Your brain immediately associates that visual perfection with a delicious, high-quality dessert. But if the baker actually made the interior out of mud and drywall, the visual perfection is irrelevant.
Right.
Epistemological asymmetry means we are looking at structurally perfect mud. If you just look at it, you think it's brilliant. If you actually consume it or base a medical decision on it, it is an absolute disaster.
And in hospitals and clinics right now, professionals are consuming beautifully structured mud every single day.
That is so concerning.
The research highlights the severe risks associated with this. The models engage in plausible hallucinations, inventing facts, generating ghost citations, or fabricating clinical correlations out of thin air.
Yeah.
Depending on the specific model and the complexity of the medical prompt, these hallucinations occurred at rates varying from near zero up to 20%.
In the realm of creative writing, a 20% hallucination rate is a quirky feature. In the realm of cardiology or neurology, a 20% hallucination rate is lethal.
Completely. The models also suffer heavily from confirmation bias.
How did that work here?
If a clinician inputs a patient's symptoms and unconsciously phrases the prompt to lean toward a specific diagnosis, the AI will often latch onto that implicit assumption and feed it right back.
Oh, I see.
It confirms what the doctor wants to hear rather than acting as an objective adversarial check on their clinical judgment.
That's really dangerous.
It creates an illusion of transparency where the AI provides a highly detailed explanation for its output, and the user mistakes that detailed explanation for genuine reasoning and understanding.
But this asymmetry isn't just an abstract philosophical debate about truth, is it?
No, not at all.
Because the research documents how hardware and algorithmic biases, when unchecked by human competence, directly result in physical harm.
We have concrete, terrifying examples of this in the medical field. Look at something as ubiquitous as the pulse oximeter.
The little finger clips.
Right. These are the small devices clipped onto a patient's finger to measure oxygen saturation in the blood. They function by emitting light through the tissue and measuring the light absorption of oxygenated versus deoxygenated hemoglobin.
But the physics of light absorption are heavily influenced by the melanin content in the skin, right?
Exactly. Because the underlying hardware sensors and the calibration algorithms were developed and tested predominantly on populations with lighter skin, the devices systematically struggle to penetrate higher concentrations of melanin accurately.
Wow.
As a result, the data clearly shows that pulse oximeters routinely overestimate oxygen saturation in non-white patients.
So the machine looks at a black patient whose oxygen levels are actually crashing.
Mm.
And the digital readout confidently says they are stable at 98%.
It creates a scenario where Black patients have a 3 times higher risk of experiencing undetected hypoxemia compared to white patients.
That's horrifying.
Now project that hardware failure into the era of AI. Imagine a hospital deploys a sophisticated, predictive AI model designed to monitor vital signs and automatically alert the ICU staff if a patient is deteriorating.
Okay.
The AI is fed the data from these biased pulse oximeters. The algorithm learns from millions of data points that Black patients with these specific physiological markers are fine because the input data says they are fine.
It inherits the lie.
Yes. The algorithm actively learns the bias, encodes it, and suddenly you have a predictive model that systematically ignores respiratory failure in minority patients.
It compounds the error at a massive scale.
Yeah.
And the failure of care allocation algorithms is another glaring example of this mathematical blind spot.
Right.
The research points to algorithms used by major health systems to determine which patients are at the highest risk and therefore require extra proactive medical care.
Okay.
The developers needed a metric to train the AI on, a way to quantify need, so they used historical healthcare costs as a proxy. The underlying logic was simple. If the health system spent a massive amount of money treating you in the past, you must be a very sick person who needs priority care now.
But that logic is entirely divorced from the socioeconomic reality of healthcare access.
Exactly.
Minority populations and marginalized communities historically face immense systemic barriers to accessing healthcare. Therefore, significantly less money is spent on their care. Not because they are healthier, but because they are underserved. They don't go to the doctor until it's an absolute emergency.
So the algorithm looks at the historical data, sees low financial expenditures for Black patients, and mathematically concludes these patients are healthy, they don't need extra resources. It literally weaponized historical inequality.
And when researchers actually dug into the math and recalibrated the algorithm, forcing it to use direct physiological health measures like chronic illness markers instead of just billing costs, the results were shocking.
What happened?
The percentage of Black patients who were identified as needing additional proactive care jumped from 17.7% to 46.7%.
Let's just pause on that. A mathematically flawless algorithm, operating exactly as it was designed, was invisibly denying necessary medical care to more than half the people who desperately needed it, simply because the developers didn't understand the real-world context of their training data.
It's the definition of systemic risk. We see it repeatedly.
Yeah.
The Framingham Heart Study, which produced a foundational cardiovascular risk score used worldwide, performed exceptionally well for Caucasian populations, but significantly worse for African American patients because of the demographics of the original cohort. We see massive geographic bias in AI datasets. Over half of all clinical AI training data originates in either the United States or China. If an algorithm learns the genetic, environmental, and physiological patterns of those specific populations, there is absolutely no guarantee it will generalize safely to patients in rural France, sub-Saharan Africa, or South America.
And there is even specialty bias, right?
Definitely.
AI research naturally gravitates toward image-rich specialties like radiology, dermatology, or pathology, because it is incredibly easy for developers to feed millions of cleanly labeled 2D JPEGs into a neural network.
Right, it's just pure data.
But medical fields that rely on nuance, deep patient history, psychological profiling, and conversational context like general practice, psychiatry, and geriatrics, they are severely neglected by AI development.
Because it's messy.
Yeah. It's much harder to mathematically encode the subtle decline of a dementia patient's speech patterns than it is to identify a tumor on an X-ray.
What this creates is a terrifying, self-perpetuating feedback loop. A biased AI algorithm influences a triage or resource allocation decision. Because of that algorithm's decision, certain demographic groups receive less care or delayed diagnoses.
Right.
That lack of care results in worsened health outcomes. Those poor health outcomes generate new, inherently biased clinical data, and then that new data is scraped and used to retrain the next generation of the algorithm. The AI doesn't just reflect the bias, it actively intensifies it with every single iteration.
So we have a technology that looks brilliant, hallucinates fluently, and encodes systemic biases into feedback loops. Who are the people actually driving the adoption of this in the real world?
That is a great question.
The research categorizes the human actors in this ecosystem into 3 user profiles, and understanding these psychologies is the only way to understand how the mud cake gets served.
The first profile is naive users.
Okay, the naive users.
These are often highly well-intentioned professionals. They look at the AI output, they see the pristine formatting and the confident tone, and they genuinely do not perceive the underlying technical limitation.
Right, they just trust it.
They sincerely believe that the sheer computational power of the technology guarantees its accuracy. Their faith is pure, but it is incredibly dangerous.
Why?
Because they take these flawed AI outputs, the hallucinations, the biased risk scores, and they unhesitatingly input them into subsequent clinical or administrative decisions. They create cascading failures that ripple throughout an entire organization.
They are the ones blindly trusting the GPS as it drives them straight into a lake.
Yes, exactly.
But they aren't the majority of the workforce, are they?
No, the vast majority of professionals fall into the second profile, the constrained pragmatists.
Okay. This is the profile that reflects the grim reality of modern work.
Absolutely. These are the incredibly stressed, rushed physicians, the overwhelmed care coordinators, the exhausted nurses. They are not naive. They know the AI has severe limitations.
They're aware.
Yes. They know the models hallucinate and they know the data might be skewed, but they are operating under extreme temporal, hierarchical, or competitive pressure.
Right.
The hospital administrator is demanding they process 30 patients a shift. The insurance company requires 5-page summaries for every consultation. They physically, temporally do not have the space to engage in rigorous, slow analysis.
So they know the wedding cake is made of mud. But the executive board is screaming at them to serve dessert immediately, and the AI is the only tool fast enough to generate a cake on demand.
Right.
So reluctantly, they serve the mud.
Exactly. And the psychological toll on this group is immense. They experience profound moral injury and intense frustration. They have to wake up every single day and watch speed and aesthetic form triumph over deep clinical substance.
That's got to be exhausting.
It is. They become deeply demoralized, and the critical, rigorous processes of the medical institution slowly rot from the inside.
And then you have the third profile, which operates with pure intentional malice. The cynical exploiters.
These are the actors who deeply understand the mechanics of the AI. They know exactly how it hallucinates, and they know exactly how persuasive the output looks to an untrained eye.
Yeah.
And they strategically weaponize that fluency. They use the AI to rapidly generate mountains of proposals, reports, or diagnostics, creating an overwhelming illusion of mastery where genuine intellectual rigor is totally absent.
Just flooding the zone.
They know their outputs are unreliable, but they are aggressively betting on their audience's inability or lack of time to detect the flaws. They poison the culture of an organization by proving that you can get rewarded for superficiality.
Okay, if the underlying architecture of generative AI is this inherently prone to hallucination, and the human pressures driving its adoption are this intense, how do we safely move forward?
It's a huge challenge.
We can't just abandon the technology. We need the incredible scalable benefits of a tool like Connexa, which can map human biomechanics and democratize Dr. Delong's expertise globally. How do we extract the value without falling into the competence trap?
We have to fundamentally change the architecture of how we deploy AI in high-stakes environments. The research outlines a scientific, slower, and much more rigorous approach.
Okay.
Relying on a single massive language model to just guess the right answer is a dead end for medicine. The solution lies in multi-agent systems.
This is the concept of using AI to babysit AI, right?
Exactly.
Instead of asking one neural network a complex medical question and blindly trusting the output, you engineer an ecosystem of specialized models that interact with each other.
The researchers detail several specific architectures for this. The first is the adversarial approach.
How does that work?
You configure 2 distinct AI agents with opposing operational mandates, and you force them to literally debate each other. For example, Agent A is given a patient's data and instructed to propose a diagnosis. Agent B is explicitly programmed with the objective of finding logical fallacies, data contradictions, or hallucinations in Agent A's proposal.
Oh, wow.
They iterate back and forth. Agent A defends its logic, Agent B attacks it.
It's basically automating the peer review process.
Yes, exactly.
The internal friction of that debate forces the system to refine the output, significantly reducing the probability that a random fluent hallucination makes it to the human user.
Then you have consensus validation. In this setup, you take the exact same clinical query and you feed it simultaneously to multiple independently trained AI models.
Okay.
If all the models arrive at the exact same conclusion independently, your confidence interval is high. But if there are variable responses, if one model suggests a minor sprain and another suggests a ligament tear, that disagreement acts as an automatic systemic trigger.
So it flags it.
Right. It flags the instability and writes the decision immediately to a human expert.
They also utilize variance detection. This exploits the probabilistic nature of the AI. You ask the exact same model, the exact same question 10 times.
Right.
Because the model is calculating probabilities, if it actually knows the answer based on strong training data, the variance between its 10 answers will be very low. It'll say the same thing every time. But if the model is operating in a gray area and inventing an answer, the variance will be high. The answers will drift. High variance is a mathematical red flag that the AI is hallucinating.
But the most important architectural shift is moving away from models that just guess the next word and moving toward RAG retrieval augmented generation integrated with knowledge graphs.
This is crucial for fixing the epistemological asymmetry. Let's break down how RAG actually works mechanically.
So in a standard AI model, the knowledge is baked into the weights of the neural network during its initial training. It's static and opaque. Retrieval augmented generation changes the process.
How so?
When you ask a RAG system a question, before it generates a single word, it first searches a highly curated external database of verified medical literature, clinical guidelines, and structured data. It retrieves the specific verified documents related to your query.
It mathematically converts the text into vector embeddings, basically turning concepts into coordinates in a high-dimensional space, so it can find the exact semantic matches for the symptoms you described.
Exactly, and then it feeds those specific verified documents to the language model and essentially says, generate an answer to the user's question, but you are only allowed to use the facts contained in these specific documents.
That is so smart.
It anchors the generative power of the AI to verifiable structured truth. Combined with context sensitivity metrics, which are algorithms designed purely to detect if the generative model has drifted away from the retrieved source material, you can achieve up to 91% precision in catching and eliminating errors before the user ever sees them.
But building a better machine isn't enough if the human organization deploying it is still fundamentally flawed.
Oh, absolutely.
The research concludes with a mandatory, non-negotiable 7-step process for any organization, hospital, or clinic integrating AI. And they emphasize that skipping even one of these steps creates catastrophic vulnerability.
The steps are essentially a roadmap for institutional survival in the AI era. Step 1 is fundamental understanding. It is no longer acceptable for a hospital administrator or a clinic director to just be a user of the tech. Before deploying a model, leadership must possess a foundational understanding of how the AI generates probabilities, what its training limitations are, and where it mathematically fails.
Step 2 is auditing the source data. Before an algorithm touches a patient, the institution must rigorously interrogate the data it was trained on. Who is represented in this data? Are minority populations adequately sampled?
Yes.
Does the historical data encode systemic biases regarding who received care and who didn't? If you don't audit the past, the AI will just automate it.
Step 3 is adversarial testing, or red teaming. You don't just test the AI to see if it works when everything is perfect. You actively deploy teams of human experts to try and break the model.
Break it on purpose.
Yes. You feed it edge cases, complex comorbidities, and data from underrepresented demographics to expose its failure points in a controlled environment before it ever goes live in the clinic.
Step 4 is the firewall. Mandatory human validation at critical steps. An organization must map out the entire workflow and identify the specific decision points where an AI error would result in irreversible harm, like finalizing a medication dosage or determining surgical triage.
Right.
At those specific nodes, the system must mandate that a qualified human expert reviews the raw data and makes the final call. The authority and the liability must remain human. Accountability cannot be delegated to a server.
Step 5 requires questioning corporate intentions. Why was this specific AI tool built?
Good point.
An algorithm engineered by a private tech company to maximize patient turnover and billing efficiency will optimize for entirely different metrics than an algorithm built to optimize long-term patient autonomy. The institution must ensure the mathematical objective of the AI aligns with their clinical ethics.
Step 6 is continuous evaluation. A machine learning model is not a static piece of software. It drifts. An algorithm calibrated to predict joint degradation in a 20-year-old athlete might fail spectacularly when applied to an 80-year-old senior with osteoporosis.
Exactly.
The institution must constantly monitor the AI's performance in real time, segmenting the data across diverse subgroups to ensure accuracy isn't degrading for specific populations.
And finally, step 7, rigorous transparency and documentation. The institution must actively document the known limitations, the failure rates, and the specific context where the AI is known to struggle.
Yeah.
And that documentation cannot be buried in some legal disclaimer. It must be completely transparent and accessible to the end users, the doctors, the caregivers, and the patients.
When you look at the entirety of this landscape, it completely reframes the future of medicine. The ultimate goal isn't just building a slightly better conversational chatbot to summarize medical notes.
No, conversational AI is just the rudimentary interface. The true value lies in highly specialized, highly constrained architectures. We're moving toward rapid protocol coding where verified medical knowledge is translated into executable logic. We are talking about utilizing advanced mathematical modeling to understand complex physiological interactions that the human brain cannot conceptualize. AI excels at recognizing faint statistical patterns across millions of scattered cases to identify early warning signs of disease.
And this brings us full circle. This brings us back to Dr. Christophe Delong, back to the computer vision of Conexa, and back to those 1.2 million human caregivers training through AMA Campus and OPCO EP to understand the emotional needs of a toddler or a dementia patient.
Yes.
The ultimate goal of all this immense technological power is not to replace the human physician. It is not to replace the ASMAT or the life assistant in the home.
The goal is empowerment. The future of medical AI is providing human professionals with superhuman analytical capabilities while fiercely preserving their human judgment, their empathy, and their accountability.
Right.
Conexa's computer vision doesn't replace Dr. Delong's expertise. It scales his analytical power so he doesn't have to spend an hour manually measuring joint angles, allowing him to spend that hour actually counseling the patient on their recovery.
The AI handles the cold, relentless mathematics of monitoring the patient's biomechanics, so the caregiver is freed up to actually sit on the edge of the bed and hold the patient's hand.
It's about leveraging the machine to protect the humanity of the care.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We started with the physical, messy reality of Dr. Delong treating the extremes of human movement, the growing bones of children, and the degrading joints of the elderly.
We did it.
We explored the invisible foundational infrastructure of AMA Campus and OPCO EP, financing the deep pedagogy required to teach human caregivers how to navigate sensory trauma and emotional regulation. We looked at the incredible promise of mapping biomechanics through Conexa.
And the risks.
And the risks, exactly. We stared deeply into the mathematics of AI competence asymmetry, realizing that without adversarial networks, our edge architecture, and rigorous human firewalls, we are just deploying fluent, highly confident algorithms that encode our worst historical biases into the future of healthcare.
It is an incredibly delicate, high-stakes balance. We are building the infrastructure of the future in real time. But as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final, slightly unnerving thought regarding the multi-agent systems we discussed.
Okay, let's hear it.
We established that the safest way to deploy AI in medicine is to build systems where multiple AI agents argue and debate each other to find the verified truth, because the volume of data is simply too vast for a human mind to process manually.
Right, the adversarial approach.
Right. If that is the inevitable future of diagnostics, a digital courtroom where advanced algorithms present conflicting interpretations of a patient's data, debate the statistical probabilities, and present a synthesized conclusion, then what exactly becomes the ultimate role of the human doctor?
Whoa.
Will the physician of the future still be a diagnostician, or will they simply become a judge, a magistrate presiding over a trial between machines, ruling on which algorithm presented the most statistically sound argument?
That's a crazy shift in perspective.
And if the role of the doctor shifts from originating the diagnosis to merely auditing the machine's debate, are our current medical schools training professionals for the right skills?
That is a staggering thought. Are we spending millions to train traditional healers when the reality of the next decade requires us to train algorithmic referees?
Exactly.
Because if the predictive model hallucinates, if the training data is skewed, and the entire diagnostic landscape is nothing but beautifully structured algorithmic mud, you need a professional who understands the fundamental mechanics of the system, not just someone who knows how to read the output screen.
Precisely.
Take a hard look at the fluent technology you interact with every single day. Look past the confidence of the interface, understand the mechanics of the machine, and make absolutely sure you aren't just consuming the red.